The world around us is hostile to the Word of God and to biblical values, but we are called to be salt and light, to stand for truth in a decaying culture. We are not called to run from the fire, but be willing to step into the fire. God has placed you at this time in history on purpose and for a purpose. Join us as we get better equipped to address civics and culture from a biblical worldview. Welcome to Into the Fire, powered by Dream City Church.
Today's topic is God over government, and I'm joined by Alison Furno, my partner in crime, I always say. Helps me with civics ministry here. We've done a lot of things together, actually, a lot of teaching, training, different things. So I'm real glad you're here with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. This is going to be a good topic.
Yeah, so we're talking about big government, socialism, even just the way that leads into communism. Because they're all connected, and the idea it's so prevalent right now. I mean, between the rise and popularity of, Bernie Sanders and AOC, and now Zoran Mandani, and all of these different political figures that are going on, and just the way that young people seem to be drawn to that idea, that concept of big government. And socialism in particular. So we're going to talk about that. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. So give me just a kind of headline summary of what socialism is.
Yeah, so socialism is where government controls production and major industries across America. So whether that's agriculture, that's the food industry, that's
healthcare.
Yeah, healthcare. There's so many different sectors, but one of the big things is they control the wealth. Right. And so right now, the wealth is controlled by the people, by individuals who have money, whatever level that may be. But the really big shift is that the majority of the wealth goes to the federal government. And so we talk about big government, right? We're talking about the federal government who oversees all of America. And what does that look like versus a small government, which we always push for, and we say the smaller government, the better. And socialism really is that kind of gateway into communism, where there is a lot of control over the people. And we know of many communist countries right now that have extreme control over the people that live there. So I think it's a really important conversation because socialism is really the entry into that.
Yes, definitely. And so young voters in particular are sort of enthralled with the idea of socialism. We're going to talk about the whys of that in a minute. But just to kind of get started, what are the stats on that, on their view of socialism?
Yeah, so 62% of American adults under the age of 30 view socialism as a good thing.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Crazy number, yeah.
And then we also have voters aged 18 through 39, 53% would like to see a Democratic socialist candidate win the 2028 presidential election.
That's just terrifying, to be honest with you.
Yes. And so here's the last one here is 76%. So the highest percentage here agree that major industries, healthcare, energy, and big tech should be nationalized. So let's talk about that for a second.
That is just, it's so because the post office did so well, right? I mean,
yeah, has anyone been to the post office? It's
you look at
a slow
things that are run
process.
by government, and it's no.
Those are, unfortunately, a lot of the beat up and broken down buildings that you see on the side of the road that you think are empty. Those are usually government buildings.
Right.
And I think there is a lack of understanding, though, of why that is.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest things that I disagree with when it comes to socialism is it removes competition.
Yeah.
And competition in business, competition in pretty much every industry. When you lose competition, you lose your fight for being the best, right? If you don't have a fight for being the best, then what's the point?
Right.
Socialism creates lazy habits. That's really how I feel about it. Is it makes people lazy, it makes people complacent, and it builds a learned helplessness to say the government will take care of me.
Right.
And so when you look at something like healthcare, I think healthcare and energy are one of the biggest things that I hear from people I know.
Right.
Saying, isn't it a basic right that you should just have healthcare? Don't you deserve as an American citizen to have healthcare?
No.
The answer is no.
The answer to that is no. But it is a conception though that people have, and I think talking about we're going to get into. I've got so many thoughts at the same time. I'm trying to figure out which one to go with first. Which thought is going to win?
Right. Which one comes to the front?
But I mean, just talking about the fact that government run anything is never successful, right? And we've had this conversation actually on this show a number of times of talking even just about the difference between the church doing something versus the government doing something. And the government wants to, charities kind of want to work themselves out of work, right?
Right.
So your goal is to get people help and to get people out of their situation and to create new volunteers by getting people successful and out of that. Whereas the government programs, I mean, nothing gets smaller. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger, right? I mean, you look at the number of people that are on welfare right now.
Right.
It's grown so much over the last however many years. Those things don't ever get smaller. They just continue to get larger and larger and larger. And somebody is paying for them, right? Nothing is free. So you talk even about free healthcare or free food or free whatever.
Right.
Nothing is free. There's a cost to create those things. There's a cost to those services. So somebody somewhere is paying for them. So the fact that you have to kind of think, does that mean that I should get those things for free and someone else should pay for mine?
And to your point, you were saying in the church you have volunteers and true generosity is volunteering your time, your effort, your money.
Yes.
And that's true compassion, right?
Correct.
Not taking your money and redistributing it to the people that the government thinks should get it, to the way the government wants to do it. And it takes out the entire purpose of being a generous human being.
Right.
Why do you have to be generous if the government's taking care of you? What is the point of doing that? And so I think that's a really good point, is there should always be a question in your head when you're thinking about where money should go or what should be happening. This comes up with homeless people and so many other things. Is that the government's job? That's the question. Is it the government's job or is it the church's job? Because
the answer to the question, is it the government's job, should almost always be no.
Right. Exactly.
It's like what I always say about propositions. When in doubt, vote no. Same applies here. If your question is it the government's job? The answer is almost always no.
Right. And it
defaults to no.
Yeah. And it does take, as you know, when the government is running something, there is no compassion. Right. So the question is, when we see people that are hurting, when we see people that are in need, is this simple, just fill in the blank, one size fits all products that the government gives us, is that the answer to true change? And we know that really isn't the answer. It's something that puts a Band-Aid on whatever the actual problem is.
Right.
So it's kind of like if you give a drug addict money continually, what will they do? They'll just go spend it on drugs most of the time. But if you give a drug addict rehab, you give them the Bible, you teach them how to overcome the things they're dealing with, they can now become a better human. And they can, that's only from people that care about you enough to do that.
Right.
And that's something that the government does not do. They hand out needles to people who are on drugs.
Right.
So, that actually just came to me.
But that's true though. It's like, how is that helping any? Yeah.
Right.
And I think in a lot of people's mind, it is helping, right? I don't think there's obviously some people who really have a bad agenda in that, but I think your average person really does think that it's helpful, right?
Right.
So you do see where again, back to this question of why are so many young people enthralled with this idea of socialism? And I think one of those things is that sort of misplaced compassion, of thinking that you're helping someone when you're not actually helping them. The government, if you think about people who have, this is something that I frequently will say with this, but that if you think about anybody that that has overcome a situation, right? Are there any of those that you can say they overcame this situation because of the government, right?
Answer is no.
The answer is no, right?
Yeah.
It's them, getting their life together. It's a church or an organization or a rehab institute or a friend or a relative or somebody, right, that kind of comes in and helps get them out of, or just their own tenacity to overcome difficult circumstances, right? There's a million different fill-in-the-blank answers that could potentially be there. None of them are because of the government, right?
Right.
The government has not helped anybody.
Right.
Nobody's better off.
Right. And I think it's at its core, I always try to say when I'm looking at a problem, most people that are involved are trying to help fix the problem, right? But one angle of it, when you insert the government into a problem that needs help and healing, one side of this problem says socialism, communism, all of these answers. Big government says, honestly, you're too stupid to figure this out on your own, so we're going to give you a paycheck and hope you figure it out. Right? And so it's because what people don't realize is when you start giving out those paychecks, now you create ceilings for everyone else. You can only make so much. So now I don't have the ability to be generous because I'm forced to give in all these different places for people that may or may not be utilizing it and trying to get back on their feet. So although sometimes people think it seems harsh to say, no, we shouldn't be giving money and doing these things and making the government bigger, you are actually telling people, I believe that you can go from nothing to everything. And that's why I want to keep the system that we have, because I believe in a homeless person being able to become a millionaire. And I know that that's possible if we get you help, if we find a way to, if you want to get better, we'll make sure you get better through the church, through outreach, through volunteers, so that everyone that wants to get better can.
Yeah. And it is still possible. I mean, we have so many stories from out of the Dream Center of people getting their life together. I mean, and you even look at someone like J.D. Vance, right, who is not that old, right? He's I don't remember how old he is, but he's younger than me. So who came out of poverty and addiction and abuse and all of these things and is now the vice president of the United States, right? That's the perfect... That's that experience, that the American dream, right, that people talk about. It still is possible to have, but again, the government is not the one that helps you get out of that. And not to say that there's not a point, there's not a place for some of that, right? Because you do have people that are in extreme need.
Absolutely.
That, it's funny because they were just talking at the last Freedom Night, Lucas Miles and Greg Laurie, and they were talking, one of the things that was brought up was about how, your first line of defense when you are in need is your family. Your family is supposed to take care of the elderly people or the babies and the whatever in your own family. Yeah. And outside of that, then your neighbors and your church are supposed to take care of it. The government should be the last line of defense for that. There is a need to a certain extent when people are disabled or they are, you have a single mom with some little kids that, is in a situation, whatever the case is, elderly people. You've got certain things where there is a need, but then one of the things that is that side effect of misplaced compassion is when the system gets burdened down with people who could be getting help somewhere else. So first of all, to your point, the church's job is to take care of those people first, right? Their church community, whatever that is, wherever their church community is. But the system gets burdened down with people who don't need that in that same way, and then there's less available to help with people who actually really need a little bit of help.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And kind of to your point, we're talking about the entire system here, and people will bring up that and say, well, what about this veteran that had, their leg blown off? What about this and that? And of course, those are the people that we need to be taking care of and helping and having the outreach for. But when you create a system that allows and pushes for people to rely on government assistance, right? To enlarge in the government budget. So people think, oh, if we have socialism, everyone will be taken care of. That is not true. That is absolutely not true. And you disable more people to sit on their couch, and you allow more people to not have a job. You allow more people to be lazy and not have any, push to do something better. So I think to your point, it really is helping the people that need help is the goal.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know if you're familiar, I want to talk about big government versus small government and some of the history behind that. Yeah. But even in the founding of our country, you had Jamestown was an example where they tried socialism, and it was a disaster because people wouldn't work.
What happened in Jamestown? The only Jamestown I've heard of is the cult one.
No, in 1607, Jamestown, and that was John Smith and Pocahontas and all that. But they initially tried socialism and had where it was just community everything, and then they were having all these issues with people not working. They weren't holding up their fair share of the work and the effort because they didn't keep. So then it became, okay, if you don't work, you don't eat, right? So, and then they had to change the way that they were doing things because that is human nature, right? Yeah. You're going to try to do as little as possible. And so the ability to pull yourself up and get accrue some wealth and do those kind of things is a motivator for people, or the ability to be able to give more of your money to charity and support causes and support, your church or whatever. Those kind of things are motivators to make more, to do what you need to do, because no one loves going to work, right? I mean, people may love their job, but
right.
There are days where you don't feel like doing something that you have to do, and we do it, right? But again, that dependence on government can create that sense of dependence.
It really is that I think your brain is wired to compete. I think that we are driven by incentive just intrinsically. And when you take away incentive for people to do better, to get the promotion, to make more money, to
be recognized,
to be more successful, when you take away those markers of success, why would I even try? It doesn't matter. Right.
Right.
And so I think it's really socialism and having a bigger government that starts to universalize everything. When you think about, so for example, we're talking about healthcare. Well, right now there's a bunch of different healthcare providers, right? There's thousands of them, probably more than thousands. I don't even know. Tons of healthcare providers, tons of dentists, doctors, naturopaths, all these different things. The more that you give money to the government and make that a national thing, now they start saying, well, we only want to work with this company. And so we're only going to give patients to this company. So when 50% of America is now underneath the government's control, and they're like, oh, well, this is the free healthcare that I get, everyone's going to go to that company. And now all the competition is not going to have any clients.
And they can charge whatever they want.
So that's also a piece of it skyrocketing. If there's nobody else to compete with you, your costs will continue to go up, and competition drives costs down.
Right.
So I think that's huge.
Well, and we've seen that firsthand. I mean, you look at like the wait time in Canada. I was reading this morning, the wait time in Canada for healthcare is like 30 weeks. That you need something, and it's 30 weeks wait to get there. And so they're coming here. And I can tell you from personal experience, so you're too young to remember all of what happened like pre-ACA, pre-Obamacare. It has destroyed our healthcare system. It actually angers me. Few things anger me. Talking about this really does actually anger me, because I lived it firsthand. I mean, we had actually, I was talking to my husband about this morning, and we were like, we had really good healthcare coverage. I was staying at home. We had 4 little kids. I had been a teacher, but I was at home, staying at home. He was the primary income earner. And we had insurance through his work, and I think we paid a few $100s a month, like maybe $500 for the 6 of us, right? There were no where you what's the word, when you have to pay to pay a certain amount before the insurance actually kicks in. What's the word that I'm thinking of? I'll think of it in a minute. It just literally flew out of my brain. But where not just the premiums that you pay, but then your deductible. That's the word I was trying to think of. Your deductible, where you have to pay $5,000 of the first, that you pay yourself, and then after that the insurance kicks in. There was none of that. We had an insurance plan where everything was covered from the beginning. Like, you paid a copay, and you got that. But now we're at the point where you have to pay all of this money, so you still get a discount. But I know that healthcare for us, when ACA, Obamacare, kicked in, I always call it Obamacare because it just angers me.
I think that's what most people know it by.
It is, right? But we lost our health insurance. So we had 4 young children, and we had no health insurance at all for like 3 years. We couldn't get it. And we couldn't get on the ACA one because we were working self-employed and had worked on commission, and so our income was very unpredictable. So you had to know how much you were going to make in order to know how much you were going to have to pay for that, and we couldn't do that because we couldn't pay for it. So we went with 4 little kids, without health insurance for years. So all of the conversations right now about, premiums and whatever, I'm like, you have no idea really how much better, right. Like there were things that needed to be corrected, but this was not the way to correct it. The whole thing has been a disaster as far as I'm concerned. From what I've seen, I don't think your health insurance and your health care is more expensive now than it was beforehand, and nobody's better off. I don't think that it's, as a whole,
Right.
Society is better off now. And we're seeing, and again, with the government dependence. So them talking about these subsidies that are about to, how the talking point is that, they're going to, the costs are going to skyrocket. Well, really, the costs are going to go back to what they were before they were artificially lowered.
Right.
And again, that's where the government decides how much you're going to pay, right? So the government had intervened and lowered those costs during COVID. And so now that has timed out and it's going back to what it was before the government started kicking in more money.
Right.
And people think that, they're ripping us off, right?
Right.
Well, no, this is what you were paying. You got a handout for a while to try to help, supposedly help through COVID. They got this handout, which has now been taken away, and everybody's freaking out that, granted, I understand that it's difficult for people to pay for it, and I'm not saying that it's not. But what I'm saying is, back to your comment about once you get used to having that handout, then the government has control over that, right? Because now you can't live without that handout of that artificially lowered healthcare costs.
Right.
Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah.
It's so confusing, and
it does. You
really
get an
aggravating.
attitude like, well, don't I deserve this? Why shouldn't it be cheaper? Why can't we just make it cheaper? Right. And the government's only solution is, well, we can take care of that for you.
Right.
And the problem is, the farther away you are from from your ability to help change things, right? The more federal government's involved, the less we have the ability to change things.
Right.
Because that is a national, that's a national policy and national stuff that we're talking about, where it would take a lot of people to start reversing these things. So,
well, and I do think there are some valid, so to get back to this, because I was also having a conversation with one of my daughters about this, and, to get back to this idea of young people being enthralled with this idea, I think one of the mistakes that we make, both conservatives and also older people like me, is that it isn't just about, okay, well, suck it up and, do what you need to do. Costs are through the roof right now. So it's so hard for anyone young to buy a house.
Right.
Rent is skyrocketing. Food costs are skyrocketing. So just to live and survive, right, as a young married couple, let's just say you do everything right. You're a young married couple and you're wanting to start a family or whatever, like that kind of ideal that you're talking about, that American dream, right?
Right.
So few of them, they're having a really hard time being able to live on one income or to purchase a home or even to just be able to afford rent. So this idea of getting things for free or having the government, when you don't understand the overreaching sort of implications of what it does to the economic system and the perils of socialism and communism, there are real issues and real problems that people are dealing with trying to just afford living, and not extravagantly, but just living and paying for food and rent and utilities, right?
Right.
That those costs have gone up. And so I think we make a mistake if we don't recognize that and say, okay, we need to make sure that we're making things better in some of those areas. I don't think the solution is more government. That's for sure. But there are things that need to be fixed, because your average Gen Z, is in more debt than anyone else. The debt rate is so much higher.
Yeah.
Whether it's just credit card debt or living expenses, college debt, and it's not, they're being preyed upon by, people offering them credit.
Right.
Not getting the education of how to spend wisely and what to do with their money, and not understanding that. And so I don't really think that it's like, just being lazy or stupid or whatever. There are some real issues that need to be, there is an element of that in some cases, but I think overall, like, there are some real issues that need to be handled. And the more that we've added government, the worse it's gotten.
Right. And I think also the education system has really failed people, where you come out of school, you can have a bachelor's degree, even a master's degree, and have zero skill set.
Yeah.
And so people are thinking, okay, school's the best option. And for some people it is, right? Not everybody, but there's so many things that when you build a specific skill, it's a lot easier to get a job, right? When you have those types of things. And I think school has not done a great job of teaching people that. And so people come out with a communications degree and they're like, what do I do with this?
Right.
You know what I mean? And you end up getting like a base salary job, and that's fine. That's totally fine.
But they can't pay back their student loans.
Right. They can't pay back their student loans. And so that is a tricky piece. And I think, students really need to think about if they should be in college, if they have a reason to be in college.
Right.
I mean, I went to college. I'm happy I went, but I also know people who they should go to trade school because that's what they're passionate about. That's what they're going to do. And so learning specific skills is something else that makes it more difficult for these millennials, Gen Z to make money and to have side hustles and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And I mean, you have generations of people not having that economic sense. I know that there's some really good programs that help teach some of that stuff. PragerU has got a bunch of videos.
Yeah.
And it's like the day of me not remembering things. The financial freedom, what is his name?
Dave Ramsey.
Dave Ramsey, thank you. Dave Ramsey's course is good for understanding. Did you do Dave Ramsey? Mm-mm. It's good. They have a student version, they have an adult version, but just going to help you with budgeting and with learning how to control your money and how to manage it and how to avoid some of those pitfalls that are way easier now than ever. I mean, the second my 19-year-old, right? The second she's 17, they start sending her credit card applications and student loan things, and like you're bombarded with these things in, I think, a predatory way. Young people who don't, they don't have money. And again, same thing with like egg harvesting and some of the, like, oh, here, take this car across the border and come back. But that's why you get young people in those kind of traps, because they don't know what else to do, right?
Yeah.
And so they're more susceptible to predatory practices.
Yeah. And on the flip side of that, just to have like a good positive thought about it, is we also have an age of things that you can so easily pick up extra money by doing Instacart, DoorDash, Amazon, selling products on social media, becoming an influencer, all of those different things, or coaching a sport like I do, coaching volleyball, right? And all of these other things. If you're like, hey, I need to make more money, it's cool. I did Instacart during 2020 when everything was shut down.
Yeah.
And it's literally you go to the grocery store, pick up groceries and deliver them to a house, Right. And so when people are in those stuck positions, I love that we have evolved to things like that. And that is capitalism. Those are businesses and companies that said, here's a problem, I found a solution. Right. And so we want the ability to say, there's a problem, I can find a solution, and be able to go from zero to where Uber's at now. Correct. And to where Lyft is at now.
Yeah.
And all of those were ideas. And that's why I love America, because you can take those ideas, you can bring them to the, public, and then you can see how they go. And it's really cool.
Yeah. Well, I think we've talked about most of the things on here. We didn't really talk about the founders' concerns and like the 10th Amendment and the founders being worried about an overreaching federal government.
Yeah.
Which we can see in action
right
now.
And I think so there's a difference between, obviously federal government is over all of the states, and then they were a lot more focused on state specific power. This goes to the states. Everything needs to go to the states, right? Why would the founders want things to go to the states? Because they don't want a small group of people to have control over a large group of people. And as we know, every state has a different footprint, a different culture, a different thing, different things that they need to be successful. And that's part of what makes America so beautiful. So I think that the founders' concern was the federal government should be limited and it should be small. Right. And the states should have the power. And why is that important to us? Because if Arizona has the power, then I, who live in Arizona, can go to my state representatives. I can go to the people that are in charge and I can have a conversation with them. I can get people rallied and say, we want to make this thing happen, right? And it gives the power to the people at a much more manageable level where you actually can like have an impact on your community.
Right.
So how can you impact your community if your community has no control over itself?
Right.
Right. And that's the thing that having more federal government pushes is, if it's all federal, we have, the states have no control. So,
and all of this stuff that we're talking about is making a bigger federal government, right? So all of the government controlling industries and controlling energy and controlling, even what Mom Donnie was talking about, the government controlling all the grocery stores. Well, then there is no, they provide what they think people need, and that's it. Like, you
Right.
have and they can charge you whatever they want because there's no competition for that. Or you even look in China with their social credit scores, and you do something that the government doesn't like, and you can't buy food, right? You can't buy all of this stuff. They can target you, and if that government, it's the federal government, right, you have even less of a chance of being able to make a difference in it, as opposed to if it's closer to what, like you were saying, closer to home. Right. You have more access to the government, whereas if your social credit score gets, tanked in China, there's nothing you can do about it.
Right.
Literally.
And to that point, if all of your information goes federal, so the more that the federal government controls, now they have your information. Now, if they don't like something you're doing, they have access to everything. And so, again, why is that bad? We've seen in other countries where, I remember I was talking to a woman that was from a communist country, and she explained this picture to me, and I can't even remember who it was, but she explained this picture to me of, I think it actually might've been on the show, where she was sitting in her house and the window was open, and the federal government there are people walking by, looking in their windows, seeing what they're doing. That's how bad it can get, where if you're doing something that they don't deem to be appropriate or what they're wanting you to do, they can literally come take you out of your house. And so, of course, is that extreme? Yes. But is this the gateway to that? Yes.
Right.
And that's the thing that people don't think about. Well, we're not going to go that far. Well, at a certain point, you lose control of how far we go.
Yes, that is so true.
This is, you know what I mean?
Right. Well, it goes back to, Reagan's famous quote about the 10, whatever number it is, scariest words in the English language, or I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
Yes.
That's the scariest phrase in the English language. But it's true, because the more, and this is kind of what we talked about at the beginning of charities want to help people get up, and governments want to amass more and more power, right?
Right.
It's just the natural flow of the way that it goes. So the more you hand over to the government, the more they can control your life. And we're seeing that right now, again, with healthcare, with SNAP. When people become dependent on that, then as soon as the money dries up, or there's a glitch in the system somewhere, now all of a sudden you can't do anything because you're not getting what the government was handing out to you. Well, let's multiply that on a grand scale where they're controlling everything, right? The power that you don't have lights to turn on in your house. This is what we've seen happen in communist countries, like in Romania and in Venezuela, different places where things have gotten really totalitarian. If something happens and your power goes off, there's nothing you can do. You can't call up APS because it's run by the government, right? So they can control whether your house is heated or cooled, whether you have food on your plate, all of those things. The more that we hand over to the government, the more the power that they want. They'll just continue to amass more and more power, and it does become a really slippery slope. So
yeah, that's really good. It's very true, and I think people need to think about that just in the sense of, where can I find an opportunity to make more money? Where can I find an opportunity to solve a problem that I see? Right. Because, like you said, there are problems. We agree there's problems with the cost of food, with the cost of living, with all of these different things. What is the problem that I can solve, right? Should I live with more family? Should I have friends move in? Should I, there's different ways to make things work, and not to say that it's easy, but there is a way to build wealth in this country if the
answer is not the government.
And the answer is not the government, right?
It's not the answer is never the government.
Right.
That's, if you learn nothing else today,
right,
the answer is never the government.
It's true.
And neither one of us, we're not anarchists, but the government has its purpose, and it should not be controlling everything. We're supposed to keep the government in check. The government is not supposed to keep us in check, right?
It's true.
So just to wrap this up, talking about a biblical perspective. So this is another thing we were talking about it kind of at the beginning of this idea of compassion. You hear, oh, Jesus was a socialist. All of these different things the Bible says that we're supposed to do all of this stuff. So what is the answer? It goes back kind of to our title, right, about God over government.
Right.
We haven't really explained that yet, but that ties into this last little segment of this.
I think back to the point of voluntary generosity over forced redistribution is a huge theme in the Bible, that we are not forcing everybody to have equal outcomes, right? There's a difference between equal rights. We all have the right to, these certain things, but we don't have the right to an equal outcome, because your outcome depends on your output. What are you actually putting out? How much are you working? What are you doing that's going to give you the results that you're looking for? So I think that the church should be involved in that volunteer, portion, which many of them are, and that's a biblical principle. We also have stewardship and ownership. People in the Bible were owners of many things.
Right.
And so ownership implies that we have the freedom to purchase things that we can call our own, whether it's land or horses or, a house, whatever. And so that property also implies personal responsibility. And there's tons of examples of personal responsibility and being held accountable in the Bible
Parable
when it
of the
comes
talents,
to,
right?
There you go.
Taken away from someone and give to someone who had more, right? This was the story, a parable that Jesus told about not using what you've been given wisely and it being taken away from you.
Right. And so I think people who, we have to think about, if people are making money doing those things, that's amazing. We have a responsibility, if we're one of those people, to give to the church, to give to our communities, to help. If you're one of the people that is in need, go to the church. That's where there is help for you, right? Yeah. And that's where you're going to get healing and support that's actually going to change your life, not just change your outcome temporarily.
Right.
And so I think there has to be a lot of healing there. We have a lot of church damaged people. And I think a lot of people that are struggling are those people.
Right.
Not always, but I think that's a huge portion of it. And sometimes it's easier to open your hand and say, hey, just give me something, right? From someone I don't know, that I don't deserve it. And it's just, hey, give me something. It's sometimes harder to say, okay, I'm going to walk into a church because it could be a little embarrassing. I haven't been to church in 20 years. Or, you know what I mean? There's a lot of shame and guilt and different things that come back to people when they come to church. Because they haven't talked to God in a long time. But that communication with God is where the healing happens, is where the restoration happens, and is where those opportunities and mindset shifts and all the things you need to get out of your current situation, the church is where it happens.
Right.
So I think that there has to be a lot of healing in that regard. And I would say that caring about the vulnerable always matters. Just like you said, it's so important we're always supposed to take care of widows and people that are struggling, and there's a piece for that. But the question is it the government's job? Right?
The answer is always no.
The answer is always no. That should be like So yeah, I think that's pretty much the...
Yeah. Well, and I think, even more fundamentally than that. So one of the things that I always come back to is that, okay, who is your provider, right?
Right.
So when you have a big, giant federal government that becomes your provider, God is supposed to be your provider. The government is not supposed to, because anything then the government is superseding God, right?
Right.
That is who you get everything from. The government is providing your health and your wealth and your well-being, right? When the more dependent we become on the government, God is the one that's supposed to provide all those things, right? And he talks about how the birds of the field don't worry about what they're going to wear or what they're going to eat because he provides for them. The scripture is full of different references to Jehova Jireh, to the God as provider, to seeking God first among all things. And the real danger in my mind, from what I can see, the biggest danger of all of this is that the government then becomes the solution to all of your problems, right?
Right.
So we're no longer seeking God for those things or God's people were in the form of charitable acts or nonprofits, or, like the food banks and the domestic violence shelters and all those places that are run largely by Christians that are there to help people, like you said, get their feet under them and, make a change and get back to being self-sufficient.
Right.
In life, right? But because their sufficiency is supposed to start and end with God, not with the government.
Right.
And so that's really, it's like, which one is supposed to be bigger in our lives? And the more that we depend on the government, if you're working, you have to depend. We pray every time before we have the show. We pray for God to just take over and for him to talk, to speak through us and all of that. And we're handing that over to him.
Right.
And if we're doing that with everything in our lives, right, with our money, with our finances, with our job, with our ability to, we know that our ability to earn wealth, we know that our ability to maintain and protect a family, those things start and end with God. But the ideas of socialism, communism, big government shift that from God to a government entity that is corrupt and does not have your best interest at heart.
Right. Completely agree.
Yeah. So that really is ultimately, I think, and I don't think a lot of younger people have heard that. They haven't thought through it. I would definitely recommend looking. PragerU has got a bunch of really great things on socialism. Talk to somebody. We've had a couple of them on the show that have talked about, two different people that were from Romania that talked about what it was like to live in that kind of an environment. Pastor Saeed was just talking about what it was like to live in Iran, which is not communist, but again, with large control over your life.
Right.
So the more that you have a government entity controlling your life, there are all kinds of people that have fled that have moved to America. And a lot of them then want to vote to ruin what we've got here.
Right.
And they don't see that connection, right? That they've fled somewhere that they couldn't do that. Even people like fleeing California or, because they can't make a living and then they want to make the same policies here. Doesn't make any sense.
Crazy.
Yeah. But, talk to someone who lived in Cuba or Romania or the Soviet Union or Venezuela or any of these countries, right? Even China, where there's a large amount of government control, and ask them what life was like, right? It's better here. And the reason is because we have less government intrusion.
Yeah. Less government, more
and
freedom.
More God.
And more God, yeah.
More God, less government. So it's God over government all day long.
That's it.
Anything else you want to add?
No, that was a beautiful ending.
All right. I think that's great. And so it's always fun to have you on.
It is super fun.
I know I miss having you on all the time, but it's always fun when we get to get back together on air and chat. We can chat up a storm.
We can.
Any given topic. I was always thinking we need to have where it's like someone gives you a topic and it's like you have 15 seconds to go. I'm like, you and I would just crush that. We could just talk about anything.
That's so true. That would be funny. You're like,
be a fun game show if anybody wants to create it.
Yeah.
But until that happens, this will be the last episode until after the new year, because we've got Thanksgiving, Christmas, COC, all the different things going on at church. If we'll have links in there in the bio to find some things, and to also Christmas coming up. And we'll see you in January, and have a great holiday season. And thank you for joining us on Into the Fire, powered by Dream City Church.
You can listen to this podcast on Apple and Spotify, and follow us on social media to find all the info on the show notes. To learn more about Dream City Church, visit our website at dreamcitychurch.us. Thanks for listening.